Wouldn't be here, and a lot of other people wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Dr. Colin Campbell. So I'm going to ask him to come up. He just wants to do something quite brief. We will then be moving on to our closing address by Minister Eamon Ryan. So please bear with us.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I would just like to say thank you to everybody. To thank you for the speakers, the splendid speakers who've come from many parts around the world, to say thank you to the audience who come, because there's no point in speaking without an audience. I thank you, the City of Cork, who's made available this splendid location.
We just have another little surprise presentation. If you just bear with us just for a minute.
Don't worry, not another graph. I'm very pleased and honoured to have been asked to say a few words about Colin and what he's done for ASPO. Now, someone earlier in the afternoon mentioned a peak oil moment. And we've all had our peak oil moments, but the man who had his peak oil moment, first of all, was undoubtedly Colin. He also has a good claim to have invented the term. I first met Colin back in 1995. I was editing Petroleum Economist at the time, and he came into my office. Various people would come into my office. I'd just beaten off a couple of rather strange gentlemen who had magical formulas for turning Orinoco oil into great wealth, and so I was suspicious. But I immediately noticed there was something about him, something that separated him off from some of these other people that came to my office. I think the thing that separated him off was his integrity and his honesty. Now, Colin has these virtues in full measure. One can sometimes understand his irritation when rather petty-minded individuals insist on making great careers out of small faults, small errors, in misestimations. I think also, if we go back to those relatively early days, that we have to admire Colin's courage. At the moment, we are now in the happy position that we're moving through the three stages of any new idea. The three stages of a new idea are, first of all, that it's ridiculed, then it's regarded as really not very important, and then finally, everyone knew it all along. Well, we're just moving from stage 2 towards stage 3. This, of course, makes it much more relaxed for people like Colin, because the sort of really nasty edge that there certainly was in the early days is now much reduced. Now, the oil industry is a quite clannish industry. It's very obsessed with its own and the behaviour of its own. So it does take real courage to step out of line, to contradict the conventional wisdom of the rest of the industry. And I know Colin was given quite a hard time at that date. So it's particularly gratifying to see that slowly, even the industry is bringing him back in. He had a large presentation, as you probably heard, at JOLSOC last week or the week before, and that, I think, is the vindication of all that he's been doing. If you want some more practical vindication, it comes, if I can find it, in this year's Global Upstream Performance Review from John S. Herald and Harrison Lovegrove. This is a standard industry publication explaining exactly what's been going on. And it notes, in a paragraph sort of carefully hidden in the middle of the report, the debate over peak oil continues, and in fact has become quite heated. Without expressing a position on the matter, we believe that the issue has become part of the industry's long-term planning. If the peak oil theory is correct, and a decline in world production is imminent, a company must choose amongst 4 alternatives: to try and become a dominant participant, find a niche operational talent, harvest assets, or liquidate quickly. Now, I think if Colin wants any vindication for his work, it is that. However, Colin is very much more than a brave man saying the right things, even when people don't like it. He's a very generous man. He's worked unstintingly. In an important sense, I would think that everyone in this audience has at some point been inspired by what he's done. It's probably the reason that they're here now. He's a great teacher. He's very generous with his information. He always has time for people. This is a fairly rare in our rather sort of self-obsessed world. He also has sheer bloody persistence. Colin has spent truly countless hours on peak oil, and we're all the beneficiaries of this. And the world was warned. It's now exactly 10 years since Colin issued or published the book, The Coming Oil Crisis. If the world failed to take notice, it certainly wasn't for lack of any effort on Colin's part. If the world has left it to the 11th hour, again, it's not because Colin hasn't been working ceaselessly. Another feature of Colin, you gather I'm a great fan of his, is leadership. Now, there are in fact two sorts of leaders in the world. There's the one that dashes out in front, noisily, ostentatiously, follow me, death or glory, that sort of thing. And then there's the much more subtle leader, the one who doesn't appear to be leading at all, but you find yourself doing things because of what they've said, because of what they've been doing. And that is exactly the sort of leader that Colin is. So next time you find yourself up at midnight playing with your computer, trying to get the numbers to add up properly, just remember it might be Colin's fault. And he has a great sense of humour. There can be few that haven't heard some of his stories, and there can be few who haven't felt happier and better with the world for having heard them. Now, peak oil is pretty heavy on what I will call the significant others. Now, I don't want to go on at great length, but in Colin's case, we do have to admire the near-saintly qualities of Bobbins, who has backed and followed her man, quite literally, through all his physical and intellectual journeys. And if I can just mention one of his key travelling companions, many of us have worked a little bit alongside him, been there for some of the journey, but none has been there for as long or as consistently or arguably as comprehensively as Jean Laharae. So I'm very pleased to call upon Colin's daughter, Julia, with a special present that she has devised, with which we're all going to honour Colin. And I'd like to call on you all to show your appreciation for all he's done in the normal way.
Well, this comes as a huge surprise to me, of course, and all I can say, I'm deeply touched, and thank you so much, and I absolutely concur. Whatever I've done would never have happened without the support and help of Jean in the second row back there. So thank you, everybody.